Perhaps another thing that came in mind now when I listened to Thomas, and I think we should speak it out directly, is um, I really like to decide if we need NgRx or not, or if we need a global store or not. It's not just about NgRx. Of course, NgRx is cool and it provides a lot of features, and it can really save you day if you use it in a situation where you need it. But if you use it without really needing it, you also increase the complexity of your system. And so the first task is thinking about, do we really need a state management? I've seen several projects where it's good enough to have the state in the database in the backend because you always have a fast connection. And in those cases, perhaps it might be an overkill. Or if some data is only used in one component and not in other components, then perhaps also there we don't need a global store. It always depends. However, something I also saw quite often is people cannot tell upfront if a global store is worth the effort. And in this case, I try to do something what I'm calling agile architecture. I'm starting with a very simple approach, but not a naive approach. It's quite simple, but it allows us to introduce more architectural stuff like a store afterwards when we really feel the need for it. And in these cases, I like to go with a facade, a state managing facade that gives me the state in form of observables. And if I feel the need for NgRx, I can squeeze in the store afterwards. If I don't feel the need for it, then I'm lucky because then I can stick with this very simple approach.
Nice. Makes perfect sense to like start as simple as possible, of course, like with the informed guess, right? Based on what we know it's coming. And then if it looks like that this could be in theory enough, then definitely like not overcomplicate things from start. I could also add like one personal experience for that topic, which was like an application where even though it was relatively large, it was like some kind of like enterprise-wide search with like maybe 15 very specific different types of searches. As it turned out, like there was literally zero state sharing between those 15 searches, right? So that kind of defeats the purpose of the global store. So we even went with something as simple as storing that state in like the parent component of every individual search because it was literally enough.
Cool. I think we both have meanwhile seen both sides of the spectrum. Applications that have been totally under-engineered, but also applications that have been totally over-engineered. And both is bad. Both is bad for maintainability. So for me, it's really fine about finding the sweet spot between those two extremes. And this also might be more an art than engineering. Perhaps it's also about starting simple and refactoring it to something more complex when needed. And perhaps it's about talking with people, trying to look into your class sphere, and being bold enough to say, well, now it's time to refactor it because our assumptions do not hold anymore.
I think that everyone is looking for that sweet spot, but it's a little bit mythical unless you guys have seen like maybe your personal or any kind of application that has achieved that like perfect sweet spot of balance. Even in personal stuff, like you always know more 1 year after, right? So you only do like the best based on like your current know-how, and of course within like a real organization you can optimize that, but really talking to people and trying to understand and kind of also putting yourself in their shoes and playing like kind of like a business analyst at the same time. But still in a year you will know more, right? And this might still necessitate like taking a step back and changing stuff based on the new information you just now have.
Yeah, totally. So as mentioned before, there is, in my perspective, not a process to get there. Of course, this what I'm calling agile architecture can help to squeeze in more complexity on demand. and to make sure it's possible, for instance, by introducing a facade. Also about thinking what might change and how likely is that something might change. I have seen systems that had an interface for everything, also for things that surely never changed, or for things where it was really unlikely that they changed. And perhaps it would be better to start without those interactions and to refactor them in when you really feel the need for it. Of course, talking to people about their expectations, about the chances that something change can help, but yeah, it won't work without refactoring.
Yeah, yeah, that totally makes sense. For everyone that is listening us right now, if you want to ask some kind of questions that you have, hit the left bottom icon with mic and request to speak if you're on your mobile app, because you can do it only from there. And we can continue down this road because we have already pretty much completed the vision application.